sci-fi action-based MMO.
Right.
Basically, think Pixar kind of art style crossed with sci-fi Lost show kind of themes with a little bit of the Team Fortress kind of humor and stuff. And you've got WildStar, basically.
The most insane description ever.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm not even getting into the influences. We love like graphic novels and anime and Disney cartoons, so we have a weird sense of what we like. But anyway, so we're going to talk about dungeons. In the PvE content, we basically have these things called telegraphs. Telegraphs are these little red circles or squares that enemies put on the ground, and you should avoid them. If you're inside them, you're going to get hurt. That's the very easy description.
Sorry, we'll make it.
So,
Sorry.
no worries.
Good thing we just started.
How you guys doing?
Hi. Not bad. Not bad.
Are you guys gonna film or set up any cameras? Or you just gonna?
Depends on the nature of what we're seeing, really.
It's an overview of dungeons, and I'm just going to be talking about them. It's a pre-recorded video, basically, and talk about it.
Okay. Won't need to film that then.
Okay.
So just let's see
Yeah,
yeah.
pretty much.
Feel free to sit down on the couch, guys.
Sure. Is that? Okay.
Okay. So, yeah. We're going to do a fly-through of a couple of dungeons, and then we'll also show off the gameplay mechanics for one full dungeon. And then you'll see a tiny bit of the raid stuff that we have for the game as well. So this is the Ruins of Kelbereth. This is an area for the Osen. The Osen are these techno-barbarians that were created by the Elden. You can see them kind of standing on the walls there. This is the Bone Pit. And if you're into like heavy metal and stuff like that, this is totally for you, because there are these giant, huge hulking creatures that have these massive weapons that they forge in this area. So you'll notice that we have a mix of things in the dungeons. We do terrain and we also do structures. So it's not just the usual, I'm in a tight corridor walking down the halls sort of thing. We do have interior stuff, but we also do a mix of things too. This is an example. This boss has a cool mechanic that creates a tether on every single one of the players, and you have to fight the tether off because it just leashes you back, and he runs after one person, so you have to fight those things off to help get that person out of trouble. So you'll notice that the dungeon also changes. We wanted to kind of limit what we call zone fatigue, where you're playing through something and you're like, I've been in this area for 20 hours, this is so cool. So we're going up further into the forge, and it becomes a lot more fiery, lava-centric sort of stuff. There's a good example of what Minos looks like. So this final boss is Forge Master Trogan. He's the guy that creates all these weapons out of this material called Exonite, which is the equivalent would be like adamantium, I guess, where it's like this really hard to break metal that's used for weapons and such. So here's Forge Master Trogan, for example. It's a pleasant fellow. And you'll notice our bosses have pretty huge areas to fight, because a lot of our stuff is very movement-based and frenetic. So we'll show some of these fights off here in Stormtalon. This is in Gallerist Track 3 of the game. These guys over here are the Pell. Pell are these leftover beings that were on Nexus. There was this advanced race called the Elden that were on the planet, and they suddenly just disappeared one day. These guys were some of the leftovers, and what they're doing is taking some of the highly advanced Elden tech, and they're trying to jerry-rig it into something. So you'll notice a lot of the tech has wires and stuff kind of sticking out of it because we're trying to create these cool things. So it starts out, these guys are neutral, and then they all of a sudden turn aggro on you. So the first introduction is like 12 dudes that just rush the players. And we have the same sort of holy trinity that you've seen in other games: tank, DPS, healer. And you can see the difference between the two. There's the Chewer right there, it's a spell slinger. You see the tank is right here, who's been buffed by the Esper with that golden armor. And after we go through these guys, we're going to see a sneak peek of Stormtalon himself. He's a creature that's inside this giant tech egg sac thing that the Bell are trying to use to create a monster. So you kind of get a little sneak peek of that. But first we're going to fight this boss. We're going to skip all the trash basically in the game today. This guy is a Hell High Priest. And so a lot of what we do in WildStar is kind of teach the player through little examples of what to do. And so with our telegraph system, which is, there's the red, avoid the red, we start out slow and say, okay, well, here's a big cross section, get out of that. See unless the guys get out there, right? And that's for a dungeon, so it's pretty big. But then on top of that, we start layering in other mechanics with the telegraphs. And the dungeons are where we get really creative with those. So, for example, there are telegraphs that actually follow the player, and they stick on them, and then after a certain point, they stop, and the player has to dodge out of them. And you'll start to notice it here in just a second. See right there, it will follow the player around, and then they can eventually dodge out of it. Or if they don't dodge out of it, they get hit by it. And smart players will actually get it latched on to enemies and use it against the enemies that are in the environment. So we have these start to appear more often. So we've had the first kind of telegraph, we have these second ones. Then what we do is start adding in other ones. So we have these floating energy fields that start circling around the battlefield. You'll see those starting to pop in here in a minute as well. So you have to pay attention to the boss, the guys that are supporting the boss here, and the telegraphs that are chasing you, and these floating energy fields. So another mechanic we have in the game is something called interrupt. What that means is bosses have the ability to block CCs unless they're done in a group of 5. So you have to do a CC in a span of 2 to 3 seconds to interrupt the boss. So we just killed off the guys that were helping keeping him alive. We just got disarmed, so all of our weapons just flew out of the hands. We have to go dash over those things to pick them up. That's one of the massive telegraphs that we have in the game as well. And by the way, if you guys have questions at any point in time, please let me know. So we have the floating things that are going around. We have the massive telegraph that's there, and we have the telegraphs that latch onto the player. So it does take a little bit of coordination and knowledge of your class and that sort of thing. We wanted to make sure that dungeons were something that were for the hardcore demographic of MMO players. Our PvE content is something that average Joe MMO player or gamer can get through. If you have a pulse, it'll probably be fine. This stuff is a little bit more frenetic, hardcore, and frankly you have to kind of be paying attention. We don't have what we call cigarette combat, where you're just kind of smoking and playing the same thing. You can't really do that in this game. You'll also notice those gold healing orbs. That's from the Esper. That's one of our healers. And each one of our classes has 2 specs. You can be, as a warrior, for example, you can be the DPS, or you can be the tank, or as a spell slinger, you can be a healer or DPS. You can switch those out with our abilities on the unlimited action set. So we're running through here. This is Aethros. Aethros is an elemental that was created by the Power, and he controls a lot of wind and air and theme stuff. So keeping with the movement-based stuff in WildStar, what we're doing is making these tornadoes actually launch you into the air. So right now they're just kind of off to the side, and if you're not paying attention, you might dodge into one, or you might just run into one. And that's not so bad, but when he actually starts controlling them, it gets a little bit more hectic. So to start, we just, again, layer in these telegraphs. So we teach you earlier, that's what these are, bringing them back here. This is a level 20 dungeon, by the way, so our level 50 is insane, our 40-man raid is crazy, our 20-man raid is nuts. We're also going to have veteran versions of these that are going to be a lot more difficult as well. So he just split into 3 there, and you have to fight those 3 and make sure that the tank is getting all their aggro on him. You'll notice the Chua Spellslinger here. It's the race that we just announced not too long ago. And that class is very mobile, very much moving around, shooting. There are some classes that are a little bit more rooted. There are certain classes that are a mix of the two. It really just depends on what you pick. So after we kill this last version of him, we're actually going to get teleported to the other side of the room. And all the tornadoes are going at the same time with the lightning. So when you're on the ground running through this, it's insane. And if you're not careful, you'll get launched up into the air. But right now, you'll notice he's conjuring up this spell, and if he gets through with it, he'll basically wipe out everybody in the party. So you have to get there and then group CC him before he can launch that attack. So on top of that, he'll also start moving the tornadoes in there while you're fighting him down here. Again, we're doing the teaching thing so that players understand that the difficulty is not so much in learning the mechanics, it's reacting to them. So we'll get to killing him pretty quickly here.
Aethros will cast you from this place.
So after we kill this guy, we're going to go on to Stormtalon. Stormtalon was in that exact weird thing I was talking about earlier. The Pell are basically trying to figure out how to get their life essence into these creatures and create more of them so that they can basically take over the planet. So here's where we build the room. Our cinematics team did a pretty awesome job with showing off all these things. We have in-game cinematics, so in PvE content and dungeon content to kind of show you what's going on, help explain the story a little bit. But at any point, you can hit escape and actually see them going on.
Behold,
so if you don't want to sit through it, you can run
the
around.
power of Stormtalon.
Alright, so this is one of my favorite fights in the game for a couple reasons. We wanted to get a little bit more creative with our telegraph usage, and this guy is a great example of that. So you'll notice his regular hits too have telegraphs. You'll see them very slightly, very quickly as they go in. The lightning effects are still going on the ground. This big telegraph that kind of comes in, so you have to do that interrupt armor group CC, otherwise it's going to come in and just hit everyone. Tank, somebody was asking earlier, you can sit in those and take that damage if you really want to, but a lot of times those telegraphs will just knock you on the ground or disarm you, so it's better to get out of them, but if you want to build up your tank to be the one that just soaks up damage, you can totally do that too. It's all about how you want to play. So this guy is doing an attack where he's leaving fields of electricity on the ground that if you run into them, you'll get hurt too, so you have to kind of navigate where you're going to go. But he also does this attack that is pretty interesting here. One person is the safe zone, and everybody has to run to that person to stay in the safe zone. So imagine if that person is an idiot and runs across the room, you have to just kind of run across and follow them. And you can't just stay in one spot because there's lightning that is generating while you're in that same spot. And then he starts to use some of the similar mechanics that you've seen before. Again, it's not something that's brain surgery to figure out, but it does make you pay attention. There's also a data cube right there. Data cubes are things that you can click on in the environment. They're little backstory on the Elven, the race that was missing. So if you're a lore nut, you totally can use those. And if you're a scientist, you can scan those and get path XP actually. So our path system is also used a little bit in the dungeons here. Where you can pick which kind of content that you want to have more of. So if I'm a soldier, I probably want to kill things a lot. If I am a scientist, I want to learn about lore. If I'm an explorer, I want to find every single nook and cranny, underground caves, that sort of thing. And so in the dungeons, there are little things that are specifically for paths, but they're not necessary to complete the dungeon. You didn't want to have somebody go like, oh, you're a warrior explorer, you don't need one of those yet. So you have different areas that you can find as a little bit of content in your life, but nothing that's really demanding of your domain. So as we go through this guy, we're going to kill him really quick, and after we do, we're going to fly through the dungeon a little bit more, and then we'll go through Sanctuary of the Swordman. Yeah, he's dead. Cool. Sanctuary of the Swordman, and then we're going to go a little bit through Datascape, which is our raid. You'll see for 2 seconds, roughly. So we're getting our flex on, and we'll go By the way, you can also play the game on the show floor if you want to check it out. We have 2 zones to play. You can play either White Veil, which has open world PvP. It's about a level 30 area in the game. And you can pick either faction. I've been seeing a lot of folks playing the game and killing each other. It's been awesome. And we also have the starter experience of Crimson Isle, which is the Chua and the Draken on the Dominion side. So here's Sanctuary of the Sword Maiden. This is the Day Escape. And that's all we're showing with that stuff. But we'll go into raids and 20-man, 40-man, and all that stuff at a later point in time, but we wanted to give a little bit of a sneak peek.